continue with the agenda. The next item is funding and the solicitation schedule. So the funding for this notice of funding availability is approximately $4 million of Community Development Block Grant, commonly known as CDBG. And these funds are an allocation from the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development, also known as HUD. The timeline for the solicitation schedule is as follows. The Nofa was issued on September 30th, 2022. We're currently conducting the pre-application conference today. The questions for the deadline for questions before your application is submitted is October 21st, 2022. And the deadline to submit your applications is November 9th, 2022.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Ana Martinez, Deputy Assistant Director of the Public Facilities Division, and going to be giving you guys an overview of the program priorities as well as the public facilities program as well as a whole. The public facilities program goal is to make low to moderate income neighborhoods safe and sustainable. We aim to accomplish this by providing funding for public facilities. This year, the priority is going to be workforce training facilities in partnership with nonprofits as well as our city departments. Funding is going to be coming from HUD through the Community Development Block Grant Fund. The NOFA is going to fund workforce and resilient developments inside the city. It's going to be open to nonprofits and city departments. It's going to fund acquisition, renovation, or construction, and it's going to serve low to moderate income persons or areas. The threshold items. So these are items that must be met, when your application comes in the door. Officers, directors, or other leadership from the organization may not be debarred. No outstanding taxes due to the city. Must be eligible public facilities activity per HUD. The activity must also meet a national objective as required by HUD. Nonprofits will have to provide proof of their tax-exempt and nonprofit status. The project must operate within the City of Houston boundaries. The applicant must have site control, which would be either a deed, long-term lease, or a purchase agreement for the proposed site. They must also submit a phase 1, which is an environmental site assessment, as well as proof that the proposed development is not in the 100-year floodplain or floodway. Eligible activities. I mentioned this earlier, new construction, rehab, acquisition, or demolition. Of course, with demolition, there also has to be a reconstruction component, and it must be for public facilities projects. So just some examples of ineligible activities, projects that are in the flood zone or floodway. Housing, multifamily or housing developments are not eligible under this NOFA. Purchase of furniture, fixtures, and equipment. This is strictly what we call sticks and bricks, so construction of an actual building. No operating costs as well. Next slide. Scoring criteria. So these are the rating criteria along with the points that will be allocated for each. It'll be for a total of 100 points, but community benefit will count for 10 points. Project feasibility will be 15 points. Development experience as well as past performance, 10 points. Operating capacity, 15 points. Leverage of funds, 10 points. Workforce development matrix is 5 points. The resilient development, 5 points. Complete communities, 20 points. And then community support, 10 points. And this slide just is a map of the 10 complete communities that have been identified as priority under the administration. Workforce development. So in the workbook that's attached to the NOFA, you'll see a matrix. So applicants have to satisfy a minimum of 7 categories from the matrix for workforce development. And the categories there will be equity approach, job placement, area of focus, and training. There's more details available, and it goes into a little bit more depth in terms of what we're looking for in that matrix. Resilient standards. Kind of the same style matrix you'll see in the workbook. You'll have to have a minimum of 10 selections from the subcategories, which include building protection, adaptation, backup measures, community amenities, green building standards, and sustainability. Also, more details are available on that workbook. Pre-construction and construction terms. So the developer will be able to select its own, architecture and engineering, any consultants, But when it comes to the general contractor, we do like to make it clear, because these will be subrecipient contracts, they will be subject to federal procurement standards. There will be a third-party independent cost analysis that will happen before the start of work. Bonding and insurance are going to be required. And the facility must be in service within 2 years of contract approval. So your timeline that you provide in your proposal will have to demonstrate that you'll be able to get there. And this is just kind of some, standard language for all of our Nofas, governing provisions. The Nofa doesn't commit the city to award any funding, pay any costs incurred. We realize there are costs incurred, especially with a lot of the third-party reports, appraisals. But all of that is, just a part of the application process. Applicants shall not, under penalty of law, offer any favors or any monetary value to any officer or employee of the city for the purpose of influencing favorable disposition towards his or her own proposal or another submitted proposal. And right after this, feel free. I know we're going to keep running through the PowerPoint. We will have a Q&A at the end. Feel free to drop questions in the chat. I'm going to turn it over to the next presenter, but I'll be keeping an eye on the chat as well. So thank you all. I think Mike Forenza is up next.
All right, thank you very much and good morning. The development standards and accessibility. This one could be new to you. Having an accessibility standard on your project is probably new. And it all depends on what type of project that you are asking for funding for. You can go ahead to the next slide, please. The two that we will be using on your projects are fair housing, if it's applicable, as well as the ADA standard, 2010 ADA standard with the 11 HUD exceptions. I will just highly recommend that you go out and find a third-party ADA consultant. If you don't know of one, we can give you a list of names of companies that we are currently have projects with us and that can help you. And the reason why I say this is most architects do not know the 2010 ADA standard. They might be okay with fair housing if fair housing is applicable, but they don't know the 2010 ADA standards. A lot of them will tell you that they do, but they really don't. And it can cost you a lot of money as well as a lot of time. Your project might not need a lot. It might not need a lot of issues, or a lot of things for the ADA, depending on what type it is. But if you don't have an expert to tell you, oh, you don't need to do this, or you need to do this, your project could get slowed down, and it could also not be finished at the end, and you have to go back and redo stuff. Next slide. There you go. Thank you. The way it works is when your plans are complete, you will send your plans to a third-party consultant for their review. They will make comments. Your architect will then make changes to the plans, and then your project can start. When your project reaches about the midpoint, 50%, basically right before sheetrock goes on, you will have your third-party consultant go out and do an inspection. That inspection is just to make sure that what you have done up to that point is correct. Because once you start putting sheetrock up and start putting all your outlets in, and then is a bad time to make changes, as well as they can also let you know where you're close. If you're very close on a measurement, that way you can keep an eye on it. Once your project is completed, the third-party consultant will come out and they will again go and look at all your facility that needs to be looked at. And then they will do a final inspection. And at that point, hopefully everything is correct. you don't have to change anything or make any kind of modifications. But at that time, you would have to do that. So it's kind of a four-part process: a plan, a correction, an inspection, and another inspection. If you have any questions about this, please feel free to call. We do want to make sure that our buildings, our projects do meet green building standards. You are able to declare which ones you are using out of this list. And the way that that will work is you tell us basically on your application what standard you are using, and at the end, or when your plans are completed, you will have your architect sign off that your project meets that standard. So if there's, again, any questions, please email me, contact me by phone. I'll be more than happy to help you get through this. And that concludes mine.
Okay, next we have Crystal Boyce with the MWSB program requirements.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you all for attending this Nofa. My name is Crystal Boyce, the Division Manager of the Contract Compliance area. As it relates to the purpose of this application conference, I will be discussing a few compliance requirements that will be subject on project activities. If you have any questions, feel free to enter those within the chat. To start, we will discuss the MWSBE program requirements. For those of you who may not be familiar with that, that's the Minority Women-Owned Small Business Enterprise Program.
First of all, I think you have control. I allowed you to have control, so you should be able to change the slides.
Program requirements will be advertised with a 35% minority women-owned business enterprise goal requirements. What this means is that for those contracts that will be led in regards to the general contractor, good faith efforts will be expected to be demonstrated as it relates to the 35% goal requirements. The breakdown for that MWBE goal is 26% MBE and 9% WBE. Again, good faith efforts will be required of those contractors that would like to do work on the construction phases of project activities. That minimum goal requirement is overall 35%, and the breakdown for that is 26% MBE and 9% WBE. Once project activities pass the award phase, there will be several documents and requirements that will be expected for submission to our contract compliance team. In that regard, we will be reviewing information to make sure that the firms that you have listed are certified through the City of Houston Office of Business Opportunity. And we'll also make sure that we review plan requirements to make sure that you're demonstrating good faith efforts to meet goal requirements, okay? All of the contractors that will be expected to work as it relates to the goal requirements must be certified through the City of Houston Office of Business Opportunity. The link on the screen provides you information about that certification process. It's also good information on there regarding other certified firms where you can filter through the search parameters based on commodity codes and based on various designations. So make sure, if you're not familiar with that you go on and take a look at that information. So if you know any good contractors that will likely perform on the project, you want to make sure that they're certified before you get to the award process and starting submitting that information in, so we can make sure you don't have any delays when that process starts. Section 3 program requirements. For those of you who may not be familiar with Section 3, Section 3 is a program that was implemented by HUD in an effort to generate economic opportunities as it relates to construction, public facilities, and any type of infrastructure activities. And so these project activities, as it relates to construction activities, will be subject to HUD Section 3 requirements. all contractors and subcontractors with a covered contract in excess of $100,000 will be subject to comply with the Section 3 requirements. And so make sure once you get to the phase after award, when you get to looking at those subcontractors that you want to work on the projects with you, this is typically where the general contractors come involved. You want to make sure that everyone knows that's interested in working on this project or these projects, that they will be also subject to comply with Section 3 requirements. What that means is that any contract in excess of $100,000 will be subject to comply with those requirements. Of course, suppliers won't be subject to that, but any type of the construction activities, those some professional service activities, they will be required to comply with these requirements. Of those, for those covered contractors with a covered contract in excess of $100,000, there are GO requirements. And so that is a requirement for the general contractor, as well as for any of those subcontractors that will be working with that general contractor, okay? And so if contracting or employment opportunities arise, the contractors will be required to meet the following numerical GO requirements. And I'm sure many of you are familiar with Section 3 requirements. And if you are, you know that there have been changes and updates to the previous rules. So please make sure you pay very close attention. So if you're sharing this information with anyone, they also understand that there are some additional requirements. And so as it relates to the construction budget, at least 10% of the hard cost construction budget is expected to be directed to Section 3 business concerns. Okay. Also, there's a 3% soft cost budget. And so if you have a soft cost budget, those activities will be subject to for you to direct to Section 3 business concerns as well. Okay. Soft costs, I know sometimes people get lost with the word soft cost. Soft costs will be those non-construction related activities. Okay. So oftentimes you see they use compliance consultants, certain type of maintenance. And so it's various areas of soft costs that could possibly be subject with that. And so just make sure that you pay really close attention when you're doing reviewing your cost allocations to make sure that we have the appropriate budget once we get to that phase. There's also a 30% new hire. That means that any newly created opportunities on the project are expected to be directed to Section 3 workers. And that newest GO requirement is that 25% of the total labor hours worked on the project is expected to be performed by Section 3 workers. Of that 25%, at least 5% should be performed by targeted Section 3 workers. Okay? And so remember, there has been updates to the rules. What the city of Houston does, we continue to enforce some of those previous rules from the previous CFRs. And so we want to make sure that everyone understands that these will be some of those minimum requirements as it relates to HUD Section 3 requirements, as it relates to those contracts in excess of $100,000. So the question now is, what qualifies as a Section 3 business and what also qualifies as a Section 3 worker? And so if you know any contractors that may be not certified at the time but are interested in becoming Section 3 certified, here is the information that they'll need to know so that we can best determine if they're eligible to be a Section 3 business or a Section 3 worker. A good rule of thumb, and I like to share this with everyone, is, go on and get all of the businesses certified. Go on and get all of your crews that do good work with you. Go on and get them certified, so when it's time to get to the sticks and the building on all of the activities, you won't have any delays and you will be able to continue the process on without any interruptions. And so a Section 3 business concern is a business who has evidence that they meet one of the following, okay? At least 51% or more owned and controlled by a low or very low income person. Or it could be someone or a business who is over 75% of their labor hours were performed by a business over the prior 3 months period performed by Section 3 workers. And so again, if at least 70% of the labor hours performed by the business over the prior 3 months were performed by Section 3 workers, we can get you certified under that category. Okay? The last category will be if a business at least 51% or more owned and controlled by a current public housing resident or residents who currently live in a Section 8 assisted housing. Okay, that is in regards to the Section 3 business category. As it relates to the Section 3 workers, a Section 3 worker is any worker who currently fits or when hired within the last 5 years, at least met one of the following categories. That would be the worker's income for the previous or annualized calendar year is below the income limit established by HUD. If you don't have that information, it's on our website. HUD publishes these annual income limits on an annual basis. As it relates to Section 3, it's based on that household size. The worker is employed by a Section 3 business concern, and or the worker is a youth build participant. And so if you have evidence after you complete the application, these are some of the criteria or selections that you'll make. So we'll know what type of information will be required in support of the categories that were selected. The Section 3 certification process. And so the great news is that the Section 3 business certification is completed all online. The Section 3 worker application, we do have a digital platform. And so you can provide that link to your workers, to your crews. And so those Section 3 workers can access that information by a click of a button on their phones and upload all of that good information so that they complete the certification requirements. To receive credit, this is very important, to receive credit as a Section 3 business concern or a Section 3 worker on the City of Houston Housing and Community Development Department projects, you must be certified through the Housing and Community Development Department, through the City of Houston. Okay, and so make sure when you're chatting with some of these contractors that you may be interested in working with, once you get to that phase, make sure that you can look in the directory, which is available on our website, to confirm that these contractors are actually certified through our office. Oftentimes we run into instances where contractors may be certified through another entity, which is great. However, in order to receive those credits for participation on the City of Houston housing projects, you must be certified through our office, okay? The certification process typically takes anywhere between 7 to 14 days once the application requirements are met. And so just submitting the application won't get you certified. You must also make sure that you are uploading the required and mandatory documents as well. Okay, to complete the online application to certify as a Section 3 business, if you've already completed that Office of Business Opportunity MWBE certification, it's through the same B2G system. It's just a separate, a little separate portal area that you'll follow the link that's on the screen here, and it'll take you through that certification process. Okay. The Section 3 worker application, as I submitted, it can be submitted through that email link, or it can be digitally uploaded through the link there. Please make sure that you share that information with your workers and your crews that you know will likely be a great benefit to the project activities that are coming up. For more information about the City of Houston Section 3 certification process, please visit our website. We have a wealth of information on the website that can give you good background and information about the certification process and many benefits of obtaining that Section 3 business or worker certification. Pay or play. So the next compliance requirement program that we will talk about is the City of Houston's Pay or Play program. The Pay or Play program was a program that was implemented by the City of Houston Office of Business Opportunity in an effort to level the playing field for those proposers that offer health care incentives to their employees versus those that do not. And so if you may not be too familiar with the City of Houston Pay or Play program, it is effective and it was implemented under Executive Order 1 through 7 of the Ordinance 2007-534. What pay or play is? Pay or play for any contracts that are valued over $200,000. Make sure you don't get confused with the Section 300,000 and the pay or play $200,000. As it relates to pay or play requirements, any contract valued at $200,000, any subcontracts valued at $200,000, and as it relates to those the overall contract, it would be for any contract valued at over $100,000. But just as it relates to those that will be expected, we know that typically the general contractor and those subcontracts will be likely valued at $100,000 or more. As it relates to subcontracts specifically, any contract value in excess of $200,000 will be subject to comply with pay or play requirements. That's professional service, construction, any service type projects, amendments, supplemental terms. Those will be subject to the City of Houston's pay or play requirements and considered a covered contract. A covered employee. And so for those covered contracts, remember, if you have a contract in excess of $200,000, and remember, we're really focusing on once we get to the phase where we'll be demonstrating how we plan to meet all of these goal requirements. And so this will be information that will be very, very imperative for those developers, for the contractors, as it relates to what's expected of the prime, as well as the subcontractors that'll be working on the project. If you have that covered contract, remember it's $200,000 or more, you will be expected to provide pay or play benefits to a covered employee. A covered employee is an employee who is at least 18 years of age or older, works at least 30 hours per week, and works any amount of time on a covered City of Houston contract or subcontract. Okay, and so again, a covered employee is someone who's 18 years of age or older, works at least 30 hours per week for a covered contractor, and works any amount of time on a covered City of Houston contract or subcontract. Pay option. If you choose the pay option means that you will pay $1 per regular hour performed on a City of Houston contract. Please make sure when you're discussing this with your employees that they understand that this is not a $1 pay increase, okay? That money goes into this large contractor responsibility fund with the Office of Business Opportunity, and it helps fund many programs as it relates to insurance incentives and various programs around the City of Houston, okay? And so remember, you have the option to pay or play. If you choose the pay option, you're going to pay $1 per regular hour worked for that covered employee on a regular basis. The play option, if you choose the play option says that you're going to provide health benefits to those covered employees. And if you do provide health care benefits, they must exceed and or meet the following standards. The employer contributes no less than 75% of the total premium cost per covered employee per month towards the total premium cost. Okay? And that covered employee contributes, if any, no greater than 25% of the total monthly premium. This is really important because oftentimes when we're reviewing information for pay or play, we'll notice that the totals don't match the 75 to 25% ratio. So please make sure if you choose that play option, which is the most beneficial, the beneficial benefits of that is you're going to actually be providing healthcare coverage, which is really what the purpose and intent of the program is. And so for those employees that work with you that don't already have healthcare coverage, you'll be extending that to them. And you will, as the employer, will provide no less than 75% of that total premium cost per covered employee per month toward that total premium. And the covered employee contributes, if any amount, no greater than 25%. And we have documentation once we get to that phase where we'll be able to review that information and let you know if you're in compliance with that 75%, 25% requirement. If you have any questions about the POP information, pay or play is often referred to as POP for the City of Houston. You can go on the POP MS. You can go on the HoustonTX.gov. A lot of the information is on our direct website, and you can also get a lot of information on the City of Houston Office of Business Opportunity website as well. One thing I wanted to make sure that I mentioned is one of the new rules with the City of Houston MWBE program. Please make sure that you make note of this. The city will now allow MWBE primes to meet advertised goals by self-performing up to 50% of the total contract goals. This is huge. And so I wanted to make sure that if you weren't already familiar with that update, that we also highlighted and shared that as well. Please keep in mind the following regarding that policy change. MWBE primes will have to choose which goal type they would like to receive credit for on that construction project, and that's going to be MBE or WBE. And once a goal type for participation is selected, the prime's participation credit will be capped at that proposed percentage or the approved goal, whichever is lower. This new policy serves to assist MWBE primes to build their capacity while not losing focus on ensuring MWBE subcontractor participation on city contracts. And so if there are not any other questions for me that you haven't already put in the chat, I wish you all good luck on the project as it relates to MWBE Section 3 and play requirements. Make sure that you go on our website if there's any information that you would like to know. Unfortunately, you can't contact us during this period, but you can feel free to go on the website and review any of our reference material that we have. And so thank you for your attention, and we look forward to working with you.
Good morning, and I will be covering Davis-Bacon and related acts for DBRA. Davis-Bacon and related acts is a federal regulation that applies to numbers acts. It applies to federally assisted contracts in excess of $2,000 for construction, alteration, and/or repair. It includes painting and decorating. Federal assistance is provided through grants, loans, and loan guarantees. It also requires contractors and subcontractors to pay their laborers and mechanics no less than the local prevailing wages and fringe benefits, which are determined by the U.S. Department of Labor. The Contract Work Hours and Safety Standards Act, which is abbreviated as CWHSSA. This program establishes the regulation of time and a half after 40 hours is met. It also establishes the $29 per day liquidated damages penalty for any unpaid overtime. The Fair Labor Standards Act, FLSA, it establishes minimum wage, overtime pay, record keeping, and youth employment standards affecting employees in the private sector and federal, state, and local governments. The Copeland Act, also referred to as the Anti-Kickback Act, its provisions prohibits the kickback of fees, wages, commissions, or granting of gifts by employees or contractors to work or benefit from project federal funds. This does require submission of certified payrolls to be on a weekly basis, which falls on every 7 days on the calendar sequence. It also regulates allowable and disallowable employee payroll deduction wages, as well as for the DOL Code of Federal Regulations 29. There are 3 different parts. Part 1 covers the determination of the wage decision. Part 3 covers the Copeland Act provisions, and Part 5 covers the labor standards provisions for contracts. For the Davis-Bacon competitive bid for general contractors, once the owner or developer is granted an award and are soliciting bids for a general contractor, they must follow the below items. They must ensure that the Davis-Bacon language is part of the bid packet and the proposal. The labor standard provisions and the HUD 4010 as well should be included. They must also ensure that the prescribed general wage decision are part of the bid packet proposal, and the request for the general wage decision will need to be submitted to the Davis-Bacon team to determine and prescribe and/or issue the applicable general wage decisions based on the type of construction. The general wage decisions will also be verified for modifications 10 days prior to the bid opening date and 90 days after the bid opening. If selected, the general contractor does not start construction within 90 days after the bid opening. Also, with this, you must ensure that the Davis-Bacon team is invited to the pre-bid meeting. During the pre-bid meeting, we will inform the bidding contractors a general overview of the prevailing rates and the labor standards requirements. The general contractor must also ensure that the selected contractor is cleared from any debarments prior to construction contract award, and they can obtain this information from www.sam.gov. Also, the general contractor must ensure that the construction contract is reviewed by the Davis-Bacon team to ensure the proper language is part of the contract prior to execution. Again, the contract packet must include the labor standard provisions as well as the HUD 4010 and also the prescribed general wage decision that will be applicable for that project. The general contractor must also ensure that a pre-construction meeting is scheduled prior to starting work on site. During this pre-construction meeting, we will review the prevailing rates, labor standards requirements, and any pending items that are still due at that time. Also, for Davis-Bacon compliance requirements, once DBRA is triggered in a construction project, it will cover all construction activities throughout the life of the project, regardless of the size and nature of the construction work being performed. All contracts, subcontract agreements, or purchase orders must incorporate the contract packet, which again includes the labor standards provision, as well as the HUD 4010, and copies of the prescribed general wage decision. Subcontractors and lower tier subcontractors must abide by the following. They must pay their construction workers the hourly prevailing wage based on the trade being conducted. They must also pay construction workers weekly with acceptable and verifiable proof of payment. They must also submit weekly certified payrolls through our web-based portal, the LCP tracker, and that is accessible via phone and tablet and or PC. They must also submit all initial required compliance documents prior to starting work on the job site, and they must also submit payroll supporting documents upon request, and those items can be anything in the category of proof of payments, timesheets, payroll deductions authorization, and any allowable fringe benefits. The contract packet, including the labor standards provision, HUD 4010, the request for the general wage decision, and the request for contractor clearance, can be found in the city's Houston's Housing and Community Development website. I look forward to working with you all, and good luck for working on this project. If you have any questions, you can be sure to put those in the chat section so that I can assist you with anything you need from there.
Thank you for the last presentation, Tiffany, and everybody who's presented. We are on to environmental requirements. HUD 24 CFR Part 58. All federally funded projects must comply with regulations found at 24 CFR 58. Neither a recipient nor anybody participating in the development process, whether public or private, nonprofit or for-profit, or any contractors may commit HUD assistance on an activity or a project until HUD or the state has issued the authority to use grant funds, AUGF for short, approve the recipient's request for release of funds. As a rule, the AUGF is the final environmental approval. If you have a limited scope project where it's not required, HCD is the one that issues the environmental clearance. That's only for a limited number of projects, but final environmental approval is needed. That's key. Until the authority to use grant funds has been issued, neither a recipient nor any participant in the development process may commit non-HUD funds, that's even private funds, or undertake an activity or project if, one, the activity or project would have an adverse environmental impact, or two, it would limit the choice of reasonable alternatives. The key is the site must be confirmed environmentally clear, and HUD must be able to confirm that before any final decisions can be made regarding the project. No commitment of funds, certainly no turning dirt, no site acquisition. Now, there is a way to make it a little bit easier. An option agreement on a proposed site or property is allowable prior to the completion of the environmental review / AUGF issuance, so long as, one, the option agreement is conditioned on completion of the environmental review. Two, the cost of the option is a nominal portion of the purchase price. HUD doesn't set dollar amounts. $10 is fine, $1 is fine, 100,000, well, not so much. I mean, there's some common sense and practicality there. Major actions, in particular land acquisition and new construction, require a current ASTM certified Phase 1 environmental site assessment, ESA for short. Current per ASTM requirements, you update it after it's 6 months old, you get a brand new Phase 1 if it's a year old or older. Issuance of the authority to use grant funds by HUD or by the state, i.e. the General Land Office, signifies environmental approval. If the authority to use grant funds includes mitigation conditions, and usually they include at least a few minor ones, these conditions must be followed for the property to be eligible for federal funding, and documentation of this mitigation must be provided to the department so that the HCD environmental team can have it on file, review it, confirm it, and just anybody else, any other appropriate parties to the project. Now, lower level projects, for example, minor to moderate repairs without acquisition, may be environmentally clearable in-house by the HCD environmental team without the authority to use grant funds being issued by HUD or the state, if there's no mitigation required. In other words, if you get lucky. And the scope of work meets all the applicable requirements found at that regulation 58.35A, showing it's a modest enough project to get reviewed in-house. So those are the highlights of the environmental review requirements in the nutshell. Of course, we have to review the project, do consultation letters with various agencies, historical, flood, wetlands, tribal, endangered species, but we're able to process these projects and get them out of the way. So feel free to drop questions in the chat.
Good morning. I hope everyone can hear me okay. My name is Laura Serrano, and I am the manager for the URA team. I'll be presenting the high-level requirements. Next slide. Unlike other cross-cutting regulation compliance, the URA has no monitoring threshold. The URA applies to a project independent of how you use the funds. But if you're going to be triggering certain activities. Next slide. So the URA has two main components. It's whether you're using acquisition or engaging in acquisition activities or relocation. And what does that really consist of? How does that get triggered? And here they are. When federal financial assistance is used at any stage for the following: acquisition. I'll go ahead and just move over to the example. When you're transferring title, or obviously you're purchasing something with or without an exchange of funds, that is considered acquisition for real property. That real property may also include easement if you need it for your development. The other main activity is demolishing. So if you're planning to demolish, as an example, single-family homes to build a new training center, that is considered an activity under relocation. So we need to dive in to verify the other item below, whether when you're rehabbing it, you're going to reconstruct it, you're going to redevelop it. And the main purpose is we need to find out if there are any tenants occupying the structure that you plan to do these repairs or reconstruction activities. Tenants can or do not have to have a lease. So sometimes we'll call them occupants, depending on the nature of your particular property. I noticed on the chat earlier, someone stated, what if you already owned the land? Obviously, vacant land, there's no structure, not a problem. If you already own it, then you're not triggering it. So, right? So you're not triggering either acquisition or relocation. However, due to paperwork, you may need to transfer title from one entity name that holds title to another entity name that you're doing this development. So on a technicality, that would be acquisition, but not to worry. It's just that few forms that you have to fill out. So if acquisition applies, we'll just need a URA assurance letter saying that you're complying with the acquisition component of it. A notice to seller confirming that they are aware that you're using federal financial assistance to do the exchange of title with or without funds, exchanging within you and the seller. And a seller occupancy certification. We just need to make sure what type of property are we dealing with, and there are different options to check off. One of those being, is it a vacant land? One being, do you have a structure with or without occupants/tenants? So we just need to have a visual of what's going on, and the initial title commitment if you have it. Now, again, if relocation applies, remember, if you have a structure with tenants or occupants, we will need to have a relocation plan. We will need to have a relocation budget. We need to know who's there at the time of application, so we'll need a rent roll. And then we need to see a template of the initial general information notice. And we can give you more guidance on this. Next slide. But it's really important to know that you can go ahead and send the initial general information notice, which is one of the first required notices under the URA, but we have to approve it first. And we would like that to happen within the 30 to 45 days after you submitted your proposal. Even if you are not selected, it's one of those HUD requirements, the URA requirements according to the regulation. Now, do not relocate any tenants until the project has been approved by City Council and that we've already made sure that you have all the correct notices to issue. If you are triggering again relocation, no relocation payments can be made to any tenants that are deemed eligible unless we approve each claim. So here's where you can find those forms that I alluded to. You go to our website, there are links right there on the bottom, and you'll click on where the arrow is pointing, Relocation Act, and we'll have to the right, you can see where, again, we have flow charts, fact sheets, more information. If you click on acquisition, it'll open up and expand that view section to obtain those forms that I mentioned, the relocation as well, tips and things that we also have like HUD brochures for you all. And that concludes our end of the Uniform Relocation Act. Any questions that you might have, go through the proper channels. Thank you for your time.
How y'all doing? Welcome to Complaints and Appeals. So real quick, my name is Stefan Lawston, and the Complaints and Appeals team is made up by myself, again, Stefan, our supervisor, Laura, and Eva. So basically our purpose is to be the voice of those that need to be heard in any manner as it deals with ACDD. Basically our job is to hear any concerns or grievances by applicants, subrecipients, or contractors, or even any member of the public. Also, if anyone just have like any general knowledge that they need about a given program that we're administering at the time, they can always reach out to us as well. We also process and investigate appeals following any determination made by a program area. And so as far as complaints, we normally answer complaints within 15 days and appeals are normally answered within 30 days. If you look on the screen right there, those are some ways that you can contact us. Feel free to reach out to us anytime. We'd love to, help out with any of your concerns that you may have. Thank you.
Okay, so now for the fun part, how to submit your application. I'm Lindsay Broom. I'm the Nofa evaluation coordinator. So I'm just going to go through the actual process because it's changed a bit since maybe the last time you applied, if you've ever applied for funding from a city. Okay, all communication must be sent in writing to andreas.smith@houstontx.gov and me, lindsay.broom@houstontx.gov. And there's no direct contact with the program area. So in the next slide, I'm going to go over the no contact policy, but all communication should be sent to either Andrea or myself, or preferably both. So I know that Mike put his information out and said if you need any help to contact him. You can ask questions of Mike, but you need to go through Andrea and myself, and we will route them to him because all of our information will be put in a letter of clarification posted on the website so that everyone has access and can see those questions and answers. Those questions must be submitted by October 21st at 5 p.m. So as you're going through this process, be sure to get those questions in, and we will, as I said, respond through letter for clarification. The application is due on November 9th at 3 p.m. and it will all be done online through a portal, which I will walk you through very soon. And then all checklist items must be included. Again, I'll go over that as well. Okay, so I'm just going to read this. For the no contact period, neither applicants nor any person acting on applicant's behalf shall attempt to influence the outcome of the award by the offer, presentation, or promise of gratuities, favors, or anything of value to any appointed or elected official or employee of the city, their families, or staff members. All inquiries regarding the solicitation are to be directed to the designated city representative, which is Andrea and myself, identified on the first page of the Nofa. With the exception of the applicant's formal response to the solicitation and written request for clarification during the period officially designated for such purpose by the city representative, neither applicant nor persons acting on their behalf shall communicate with any appointed or elected official or employee of the city, their families, or staff through written or oral means in any attempt to persuade or influence the outcome of the award, or to obtain or deliver information intended to or which could reasonably result in an advantage to any applicant from the time of issuance of the solicitation through the pre-award phase and up to the date of the city secretary publicly posted notice of any city council agenda containing the applicable award. However, nothing in this paragraph shall prevent an applicant from making public statements to the city council convened for a regularly scheduled session after the official selection has been made and placed on the city council agenda for action, or to a city council committee convened to discuss a recommendation regarding the application. Okay. So what I'm going to do now, I am going to share my screen and just walk you through how to access the Nofa, how to submit the Nofa, and how to see the documents that are required. Okay, so if you are at our housing website, HoustonTexas.gov/housing, you scroll down to the For Businesses section and you click on Funding and Contract Opportunities. From here, you scroll down, you can click on Nofa, so Notice of Funding Availability under the Housing Department funding. And it pops up right there under the featured Nofa, the Public Facilities Development and Renovation Program. So here is kind of like where you're going to find everything you need to complete your application. First tab, View Nofa, will take you to the Strategic Purchasing website where you can actually look at the Nofa itself, and it'll all be there in a PDF format. The next tab, View Applicable Nofa Documents. If you hit this tab, it opens up a table below, and as you can see, all of the documents that are required are going to be here in this list. And there's 3 pages, so make sure that you go to each page. And what I'm going to do is open up this CDBG Public Facilities Checklist and show you. So this checklist is kind of like your guide to submitting the application. It tells you every single thing that needs to be uploaded to the portal when you're submitting your application. And all of the forms that you may need as you're moving through this checklist will be located here on the website. Hold on one second. So, for example, here it says you need the application workbook. Well, if you look over here in part 2 on the website, it shows you that there's the application workbook. So each one of these items in the checklist, you should be able to find over here in your list of documents. Now, there are some documents that don't have, there's some required checklist items that don't have a document per se. It's something that you just need to provide. For example, your sam.gov unique identifier. That's not a form here, but it's something that you need to provide. Another example would be your bylaws or your rules. That's not actually a form, but it is something that you need to provide. So just to be clear, when you submit your application, you need every single thing on this checklist submitted in a separate document. And if there is a corresponding form, like the certification regarding location of facilities and shelters, it will be here on the website for you to download. And again, if you're going through the process and you're having questions, please submit those via email to Andrea and myself. So now I'm going to walk you to the portal, which is the third tab here. So this is the portal, and it has some kind of standard information that you need to enter: your project name, project address, those type of informations. Just make sure anything that has a red asterisk has to be completed. And then here at the bottom, it has a drop down. So if I go to select, yes, this is a Nofa submission, it has a button that says attach Nofa submission documents. So these documents are going to be all of those items that you saw on the checklist. Each one we would like separate and named according to the name on the checklist, so that it's easy for us to see what document it is that you've uploaded. A few things to note about the portal. It is, for security reasons, it will time out if you're idle. So our suggestion is to have every single thing ready to go. Open up the portal, put the information in, and submit. What I would not suggest you do is open up the portal, toggle over to another document, start working on the document, then toggle back over later to the portal, because it may have timed out, and then you have to start over. So what we've seen with our previous NOFA that was submitted through this process is that you just need to sit down and do it all at once. At one time, and make sure you have all your documents ready to go. So one other thing I wanted to talk about, I'm going to pull back up the NOFA, and I'm going to go down to the instruction for applicants, and just go through this so that it's crystal clear what you need to do when you're submitting your application. You must use the portal, as it states here. You cannot bring paper applications. We will only accept applications via the portal. Applications should be submitted no later than the date and time indicated for the submission in the NOFA. Format is Arial 12 font, double spaced. Materials should be submitted as directed in the hyperlink. If there's page limits, you must adhere to those page limits, and there are page limits within the NOFA. Just make sure you read the NOFA very carefully. Complete application. Applicants are advised to carefully review all of the requirements and submit all documents and information as indicated in this NOFA. Incomplete applications may lead to an application being deemed non-responsive. Non-responsive applications will not be considered. Timely receipt of application. Applicant remains responsible for ensuring the application is received at the date, time, place, and hyperlink specified. The city assumes no responsibility for any application not received, regardless of whether the delay is caused by some other act or circumstance. So that is the nuts and bolts of how to submit the application. What I suggest is to go ahead and start looking through this, and if questions arise, just immediately send those questions to Andrea and I, and we'd be more than happy to provide a response via letter of clarification. And yeah, we appreciate you coming today. Hold on 1 second. Let me stop sharing the screen. These in the NOFA slides, it actually shows you what I just showed you. So if you need to see a more visual slide deck there, you can see that. So what I would like to do now is open it up for questions. If you write a question in the chat, we will read it aloud and find you an answer. And also all the questions that have already been submitted in the chat will be included in a letter for clarification. So you'll be able to see those after this call once they're posted on the site.
I think we've caught up and answered all of the questions that have come in so far. And Lindsay, unless you have any objections, I think if folks want to just unmute and ask questions, I think that's okay too. But hopefully we covered everything, enough. I'm sure once you all start digging into the application and the documents, you may have additional questions. So, definitely reach out before that 21st deadline with any additional questions that you all may have. Let's see. I think we just got another question. Does the applicant have to reside in the city of Houston, but the business be in Houston? Yeah, so the facility that you're proposing to either acquire, reconstruct, rehab has to be within the city of Houston and pay taxes to the city of Houston. But, in terms of, the actual person who's submitting the application or representing the organization, if they live outside of the boundaries, that's not something that would be an issue. Any other comments or questions? All right, well, if there's nothing else, I guess.
Wait on it, Lindsay. I just wanted to show them where this PowerPoint will be if they want to access it later.
Great.
So if you scroll down to the bottom of the funding page, you'll look for this T32511, and over under additional resources, there will be a link like this that says pre-conference recording. So you can go to that at any time to re-watch this recording. Oh, and it looks like we had another question. Can startup businesses apply?
And unfortunately, no. We are looking for organizations that have a history and the capacity to be able to, not only construct or develop the actual building, but also be able to perform the operations of the site and be able to keep programs going and have a history of showing that they've been able to do that. And Lindsay, I'll leave it up to you if you want us to just go ahead and wrap or.
Yeah, if there's no other questions, then I appreciate everyone joining us today. Thank you to, oh wait, there's another one. Will a copy of this presentation be available? Yes, it will on the HCD website under the funding page.
And the recording will also be made available, so you guys can always refer back if you'd like to watch this over.
Oh, yes, that's fine. Okay, well, I appreciate everyone coming, and thank you all. Have a good day.